Okay folks, good day. Matt here again in my garage once more, and with what is surely the most entertaining video on boiled potatoes that you've ever seen. The lumpers I harvested one plant early and got a couple of controls here just to see how they compare in terms of flavor and texture. Historically speaking, descriptions of the lumper, I've come across a lot of different ones. They vary quite a bit. They've been called coarse, watery, just kind of mealy, and then simultaneously also not mealy. So I'm quite skeptical about what the actual kind of historical consensus is in terms of how they're viewed from a culinary perspective. So right here we have just a couple of standard varieties, an early red, an early white, and then this one being our lumper. I will note one thing right away, despite it's a little smaller and they had similar boil times, and that's all this was, is just a boiled spud. The skin on the lumper seems both simultaneously very sensitive, very light, but also kind of coarse and flaky. I don't know how you get the two together, but that's just how it kind of feels, which is interesting. But yeah, I'm here with my, of course, to add to the stereotype of the situation, my Guinness. It's certainly not as good as it is fresh on draft, but hey, in a can it'll do in a pinch in Canada, so I'm going to take it. So let's see, we're going to start with a control. So we're going to have a little section of this red. Oh yes, the exotic flavors of 19th century Northern Europe. And as you'd expect, it tastes like a boiled potato. It's a very good boiled potato. It's a new potato. Well, it's a new this season potato anyway. Okay, so we're going to try the infamous / famous lumper. Seems like the texture's the same, consistency the same. Again, they're potatoes. How different can they be? But apparently, according to the historical record, they were quite different. From a flavor point of view, being a boiled spud, hardly any different at all. The texture is definitely different though. It is a little harder, and it's not harder because I boiled it less. I boiled it an equivalent amount of time, if not maybe even a little bit more, considering it's smaller than the other two. That to me kind of confirms that it being called a coarser variety. That makes sense. And again, the skin on it, for whatever reason, is, despite these being harvested fairly early, and the skin not curing, like I didn't leave these in the basement for a month to harden up. The skin is both a little, I mean, it's not hard to chew, but it's more difficult as compared to these other two. Just gonna have a little palate cleanser here to make sure we keep this properly scientific. What I don't understand is descriptions or historical descriptions referring to it as particularly watery or mealy or something like that. It's neither of those things. I'm not really sure. I can't help but think though that a lot of those descriptions, based on the time they were written, some of the inherent distinctions or tendency of people of a higher class to look down on what the lower classes were doing. And so if the lower classes, particularly the poor peasant class, were eating this vegetable, this tuber, even if it wasn't necessarily that different from the spuds that the higher classes were eating, or more well-to-do, they would maybe make up reasons, or kind of they would almost artificially put a description on it that kind of lowered the lumper's status in general, just because of the association it had with the lower classes. I don't know, that's just an idea, but it certainly doesn't seem to match some of the descriptions that I've read. I mean, maybe they had a different method of preparing them. I don't know exactly how the lumper circa 1844, 1845 was usually prepared, but I would imagine it'd be something as simple as boiling or roasting. I mean, they're not French frying and deep frying them, that's for sure. I think maybe the other thing to note is and the sheer quantity of these of these things that poor Irish folks ate in the mid 19th century. The numbers vary naturally, and of course it depends on who the person was. Like if you're a 12-year-old female, it's going to be different than you being a 17-year-old or a 24-year-old working male field worker. But I read that it's something absurd, like 12 to 14 pounds a day of this one thing, supplemented maybe with some foraged greens or maybe a little bit of dairy here and there if you're lucky. But can you imagine that, like 12 or 14 pounds of potatoes every day? And it seems ridiculous, but if you're a field laborer and that's what you're doing day in and day out, you got to get your nutrition somewhere. And again, the Irish statistically were actually taller than their European counterparts, or their continental European counterparts, in part because of the nutrition afforded by the potato. Whether that extra couple inches in height is worth having to eat 12 to 14 pounds of these suckers every single day, I don't know. I think saying that would get old fast is a egregious understatement. And I like potatoes. Heaven forbid you don't actually care for them. So overall conclusions: it's a potato. It's not bad. I'm gonna use these in something for supper tonight, and I'm going to enjoy harvesting the remaining 2 plants that I have. Hopefully they yield a little bit better than the first one that I did harvest. But overall, it's just been really cool. I think being able to eat something as historically significant as this one particular variety of crop is. They call it the humble potato, and that's a very apt description. That this one thing had such an enormous impact from a human migration perspective, from an agronomic or environmental perspective. Its significance can't be overstated. And to actually take a bite out of it's pretty cool. Really appreciate everyone tagging along and watching a video about boiled potatoes and every other little fact that I've tried to share previous to this. It's been really interesting, and we'll see where it goes from here. Thanks.